so where you at? Where you, so where you at?
Good afternoon. My name is Olu Jabari. Again, welcome to another segment of Just Kicking It. We're here live in Sterling Heights, Michigan at 43710 Shaner Road in Sterling Heights. Of course, you know we come out of Detroit, which is our home, at 7701 Harper, Detroit, Michigan, with Al-Kibalon Village, which is our partner. I'm your host, Olu Jabari, again, and this is another segment of Just Kicking It. And please reach out to us at 313-629-8524 and or send me an email at justkickdem@gmail.com. We're interested in having you on our show. We know you got some history. We want to talk to you. So you can reach out to me personally as well, 313-629-8524. I'm going to have our guest introduce himself. He is no stranger to the martial arts scene, definitely not just Michigan, but abroad. And then we'll get into the martial arts karate sauce by asking some questions that I know he's familiar with. But for the most part, this is a show that talks about the history of who we are as African Americans in the martial arts sector, in which we are all over the world. So again, I'm Olu Jabari, your host. I'm going to let my guest introduce himself and let him tell you a little bit about himself, you know, how he started the martial arts, and we'll follow up with some more questions from there. And we'll just have a good time. We're building the history and the legacy of the martial arts. So my guest, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, MQ. I'm Randy Hargraves, and I'm the chief instructor of Kung Fu Downriver, which is a Wing Chun school. Mm-hmm. And I originally started the martial arts. My very first martial arts were back in the 60s, everybody was Kung Fu fighting.
Yes.
Didn't have a lot of money, but there were some people in the neighborhood were studying underneath some martial artists, and they would come home and then they would share that, and we would fight with each other and practice, and a lot like I'm sure later on listening to the stories of Grandmaster Fort,
yes,
talking about how the Yellow Tigers had evolved out of his mother's basement,
yes,
after he trained. So it was sharing knowledge and practicing and training and trying to figure this out. So that was my first interaction with the martial arts, and I didn't pursue it a whole lot after that. Did a whole lot of slap boxing and a lot of fighting and whatnot in the backyard. But to pursue it, to go in and join a school, my family didn't have that kind of finances at the time. So what I did was I pursued sports. And then after I got out of high school, I joined the military, and I got, of course, martial training in the military. Trained quite extensively in the military. I did just shy of 11 years, and got out. I came home, and to me, I think at that point I wasn't training anything. I got kind of, lethargic. But my wife and I had our second son in 2000. And what drew me to the martial arts, brought me back into it, if you will, was my son wanted to train. And so I did the research, and he needed real training. He was born with a situation. He was bullied pretty significantly, pretty heavily. And other kids were bullying him at school, so I thought, well, we need to get him somebody to teach him to defend himself. And of course, you don't want to listen to Dad.
Of course.
So we had to find somebody that would be an influence for my son. He was 7 when we started training, and what I found was I looked up martial arts, and we were living in Taylor, and we looked up. There was 2 schools in Taylor, but the guy that had the history it was real martial arts. They were teaching real self-defense.
Yes.
Was Grandmaster Joe Anopa. And Grandmaster Anopa, if you look at the General Choi Chan-hee's book on international Taekwondo, Grandmaster Anopa is one of the demonstrators. When you look at the pictures in there, he was
right.
So he's one of the originals in the Taekwondo. So he trained us, and initially I wasn't training. When I took my son there, I was like, okay, my son needs to learn to defend himself. And I walked in, and Grandmaster Anopa's, I believe he was American Indian, indigenous American, I think is the right term, forgive me. But I walked in, and he's a smaller man than I am. I'm 5'8", but he was about he was thinner than I was. Of course, I was a little bit overweight. I was going to work and coming home, and it was a different phase of my life. Right. But when he said, well, why aren't you training? I was like, and I thought to myself, and I almost laughed, and it's the arrogance and the ego jumped up. It's like, wait a minute, you have no idea the man that's standing across from you.
Yes.
I've got this training background with the U.S. military, infantryman. I jumped out of airplanes, I went through Ranger training, and I've done all these things. I'm thinking, this guy obviously has no idea who I am, right? And I was like, well, I don't really need it. And I don't know what prompted him to do it, but he reached out and he flicked my throat, and I felt the power in his hand, but I felt the pain. And I was like, whoa, nobody's ever made me feel that way, and I don't know that I would ever do that, and I don't know what prompted him to do that. But anyway, I was like, wait a minute. But I knew he had control of me. And I was like, you know what, there's something here. I better check into this. So I started training with my son there, doing Taekwondo. And we trained until Grandmaster Inopa passed away. And then we started training underneath Master Ryan, which was one of his Grandmaster Inopa's senior students. Okay. And he was essentially left with his student population there in Taylor. But then they sold the building we were training out of, so we were incorporated over into Heritage Martial Arts, which were two students that had started under Grandmaster Inopa, but then they jumped over and they were training underneath BCU, Grandmaster BCU. And so we trained with them for a bit. And during that time, when Grandmaster Inopa passed away, I was like, well, I got to find somebody to train under. And the martial arts was, it's a way of life once you start it.
Yes.
So I looked up the Yellow Tigers. I work in Detroit, and I was working in Southwest Detroit. And like, well, I need someplace I can stop in either before work, at lunch, or after work. So that seemed like a decent location. And I stopped in and I walked in, and there's this giant of a man. And he's like, oh yeah, and he was really nice. Delfort was so engaging. He's like, yeah, come and train with us. So he would have me come and train at lunch with him and Grandmaster Dwayne Pitcher. He used to train at lunchtime there, occasionally. And I think he's out at World Class Martial Arts in Livonia. But so I was training with these two gentlemen at lunch and just, kind of pursuing my thing. And then, Delfort he adopted me into the Yellow Tigers family. And it was there that I started training with those guys. And it was a different training than I'd been doing. Again, at Grandmaster Inopa's school, it was very, very real. The sparring was, tap out sparring. It was, real fighting. It was real hitting. Guys were, trying to hurt each other. So you had to learn to defend yourself real there. The type of training that they were doing at Heritage, not so much. And I recall one time we were training because we'd come out of Grandmaster Inopa's. Somebody said that Grandmaster Yu had made a comment he really wasn't too pleased with. We were a little bit too violent. Too barbaric, I think it might have been the term he used for us. And since then, I've learned that's the way that many of the Asians look at most of the Westerners as barbarians. So, but anyway, but Delfort had adopted me into the Yellow Tigers family, so I started training there regularly. And then, of course, he had serious health issues.
Right.
And, it wasn't my intention at the time, but it's like, all right, well, we need to do this. And, he had a couple of his masters were still there, but they had other commitments and things. So it's like, I never felt like I really had the wherewithal or the capacity. So it's like, well, Delfert's like, oh, I'm going to teach you some stuff I never taught anybody. And he did. And I would tell you this, I'd probably go off on a tangent on this. So one of the things I would say is, when I went to take my son to take martial arts, I think where I was at a place in my life, it was like, all the best of my life was behind me, right? And I was just, okay, I'm going to put in my time, I'll retire, I'll do this, and then I'll, go off into the sunset as we do and become an ancestor, right?
Love it.
But what I would say is Grandmaster Inopa rejuvenated my spirit as a human being to feel like, wait, I'm still alive.
Okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
And this other part's hard.
Take your time.
You know, I had a great deal of love for Grandmaster Fort.
Yes.
He was a special human being, and he was a human being, and I think that's important. But what I always said was he reinvigorated. You know, we always do the.
Yes, sir.
You know, he reinvigorated my heart. You know, and awoken that human being spirit that's within us, right? That we can be, you know, we can come in and we can train so hard, and you know the way that we train with each other.
Yes.
But as we're doing that with each other, it builds the relationships, it builds the love that we have, because we're not doing it in a mean or spiteful or egotistical manner. It's like we're trying to make each other, you know, iron sharpens iron. We're trying to make each other better.
Yes.
So Grandmaster Fort, what he taught me, he said he was going to teach me some stuff that he hadn't taught anybody else. But I think I realized what he said was, you know, I got to watch his health deteriorate.
Mm-hmm. I remember him.
That's a big loss.
Yes.
You know, for all of us.
Yes.
And, you know, there was a lot of things that, you know, I heard a lot of stories and whatnot, but, you know, like I said, no matter how good you become as a martial artist, you never get to matriculate above the rank of a human being.
Teach.
Right?
Right.
So, you know, whatever title you give it, oh, what's your title? I think the best title I've got in my life has been father, right, to my children. But today, you know, so bringing that back to, you know, from that, so the martial arts, it reinvigorated my spirit. It got me to it got movement again, and then meeting the people, the relationships that I've developed with the people, and I think that at Grandmaster Fort's funeral, one of his longtime students. He made a comment when they were having students say the words, and his comments live with me today. He said, you know, the one thing that he got out of all of his training was the relationships with the people. And that's what, you know, that's the one thing I think that keeps me active, to continue to train the way that I train. I travel. Again, after Grandmaster Fort passed away, Impedici Cofield, you know, and during the process of when Grandmaster Fort, you know, started having his health challenges, Impedici, you know, I started trying to run that school for Grandmaster Fort. And so I had all of his students, and then he got Grandmaster Franks to come over and assist me. And we got that, and we were able to get, you know, Olivia and Caleb and Brianna to come back in. And so the Yellow Tigers, we were trying to maintain that organization and maintain that lineage of, you know, from Impedici. But during that time, Impedici, he called me, you know, I mean, you think in terms of your relationship with your students, like, you know, you call me, I'm this, you know, I'm busy. Impedici, you know, with all of his worries and all the stuff that he had to take care of, he called me on a regular basis. How you doing? You need anything? You know, he invited me over to train. Of course, he adopted me into the Alkebulan family, and I'm very honored and humbled through that whole process. And we maintained the Yellow Tigers for a number of years up until the COVID, I think, is when the Detroit campus, the student body, it kind of, we moved, so we lost some students there, but we still had quite a few students that had started their training. But I will say, you know, I started training the students with the Yellow Tigers. And, you know, it's hard to do something. So, you know, in my personal education in the martial arts, you know, there's a military contingent to that. And that's not something you could utilize in the civilian sector. Like, you're gonna, pull a gun out and shoot somebody. I mean, that's military level to what level of escalation. Right. So I think for me, the training, it's hindsight, right? I was training with a young man. He'd come home from Afghanistan, and he definitely had PTSD. Okay. And when he was training, he would either be homicidal or suicidal. I mean, he was just super emotionally charged. And I don't mean like literally, but it's like he was either against himself or against the world kind of thing. But I watched him evolve, and today he's like completely different human being. You know, he's trying to do things to change the world, to make the world a better place for this creative society. And it's an idea. Hopefully it catches on. But watching that, one day he made a statement. He said the reason that he was there was to find a less lethal answer to his problems. You know, and I thought about that. And I thought, you know what? I think that's true. That's a good reason for an ex-military guy to be here. But then what I realized, the more that we train, you know, I am not the same human being today. You know, I say we never enter the same water twice, right? Right. I am not the same man today that I was at any other point in my history. But you know, I'm still I can be, you know, I got to be in charge, and I'm going to make things happen kind of guy. That's, you know, maybe that ego personality that we have, but you know, my heart's always, I'd say it's been softened. You know, again, Grandmaster Ford, I think, awakened that, you know, something that I denied about myself, you know, an aspect of my humanity that was, but I think then what happens with the training is, it had allowed me personally, an environment to find myself.
Gotcha. Right?
Because you think in terms of life, it's like, okay, you're the boss here, or you're the employee there, or you're the wife or husband, or the whoever you are. You know, I'm filling these roles, and I'm doing this for everybody, but I lose myself in that process, and I become all these roles, and I think, well, who am I? Absolutely. Right. So I think with the training, especially in the past few years for me, and again, getting older, it's like, you know, you really have to look at that. You do. Who are we? What are we here for? You know, what's our purpose? Are we serving that purpose? And I think, you know, a lot of folks don't have the courage to do that. And I think training within the environment that we do, and for me, I would say it's the people that I surround myself with. What I found out, again, the relationships. So if, you know, this is one of the things when I tell people, you know, this is, you know, why would you tell somebody to take up the martial arts? Is it worth being better at everything else you do in your life? Because what we do is we instill systems, right? That somebody comes in and you teach them from the ground up. You build a foundation for them. And it's not like, okay, you think about how we're taught information in school. You come in, you're presented this information, you know, there's going to be a test on Friday. We do that. We get the test. Friday, we take the test, get your grade, throw that information away. A lot of folks don't reiterate that. And one of the things that I learned, I think, in the martial arts was that the way that we really do learn is, and maybe it's just me that learned that way, but I think about, you know, college and high school and all that, just all the information that I was given, I don't have access to very much of it anymore. But in the martial arts, and especially when I'm training now, and maybe I get to that, but it's like you do the same thing repetitively, playing kata, right? Or forms. We do it so much, and I like the saying is we don't do it till we can't get it wrong, or till we get it right, but we do it so much that we can't get it wrong. That's true. Right? So, you know, I've got students, they come in, it's like, okay, they're going to throw 1,000 punches as a warm-up, or you're going to throw, you know, a couple hundred kicks, and that's your warm-up. What's the purpose of that? Right. That's a question.
That's the question, but that, you know, I go back to what you said, how in regards to the martial arts, how, you know, you live and then you live in the martial arts and you find out, wow, I'm capable of doing all of this. I'm not talking about the kicking and punching. I'm talking about the building relationships. Yes. And when you build relationships in the martial arts sector, we build relationships that are lasting for life. Whether we never talk again because of something went on, when I see you, we still, hey, how's it going, Sensei? How's it going, Sifu, right? And I could tell folks, I have a lot of friends I do business with, and I had a lot of business friends that I just train with, and I have my family. The martial arts is a total family. I'm familiar not only with you and some of your training, had a chance to sit and watch and be part of what you've done, but more so be part of what Delford Ford has done. We know that he's still with us because we're all still here. And I had a chance to, you know, be with him, you know, prior to him moving on to the ancestors. And not only that, watching Grandmaster Delford Ford, his spirit, different, totally. And I totally get it because he kept some things inside. And as he would probably say, when it's time for you to know, you would know. And you'd be like, what? So I learned a lot from him, and it coincides with you. Umfundisha was my only instructor. Yeah. I was one of the only students he ever trained one-on-one. There's only about 4 or 5 of us that he's done that with. But I'm happy to say that Umfundisha, Grandmaster Delford Fort, people like that, you know, Walter King, Jackie King, and Curtis Butler, Richard Plowden, and all those folks have done so much for the art. But I go back to this point is that we've changed the art to fit who we are, right? Not only that, we've changed the art to include our families now, right? And when it gets back to martial art from a self-defense perspective, we had to make people understand that self-defense wasn't just kicking and punching and you pay and you come once a week and that's it. We had to bring the family concept that this is a life. You don't stop. We were talking earlier and you talked about, well, I had to do A, B, and C. Yeah, but you never really scaled back. You kept going.
Yeah, I think again, so my personal history and as I've gone through the arts, the most influential human being in my life, I'm going to say, and there's been a lot of great human beings.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to always have to refer back to Delford Fort.
For sure.
Right. And everything that he's the reason I went and started doing the Kung Fu, because I wanted to close out my training with this thing that he started his training with to kind of close that loop. But if it wasn't for Delford, I would never have pursued, so today, what we do have, the Yellow Tigers in its form that Delford had it is not there right now, and it may be again. Again, we're in the early post-COVID world for us, and again, we're in a neighborhood. There's not an abundance of resources. I'm still in a pretty beat-up area, Detroit.
Sure, I get it.
But I think what. The reason that we stay there is, that was my commitment to myself and Delford, was that I would maintain that there would be martial arts training to those kids in our neighborhood. And we're in Core City. The average income there is $1,000 a month, so there's not a lot of resources.
You get it.
And right now there's not a lot of training. We got a motorcycle club right next to that school. And it's not a real conducive environment for families in and out, especially when they're there with their motorcycles, and they're kind of intimidating. They're good people, they're good guys, but
I get it.
It's that
that feel you get.
It's kind of the thing. I say the same kind of thing. If you say a biker and you see a picture, same thing. I think MMA did us a disservice when you think martial artists. Now you're thinking about some sport or some jock or whatever. And I think most of them and the most intriguing students, there's so many of them. I really think the martial arts is. My son had just posted something the other day. And it was really the martial arts are probably more for geeks than anybody else. And certainly my family's geeked out on the Kung Fu. My entire family. Again, it goes back to trained under. My youngest son, he come over and trained under Grandmaster Fort. My oldest son, he's took up the Kung Fu training. He had trained Taekwondo for a number of years when I was much younger. But then my wife, she's been training Kung Fu now. She's into her 8th year.
Beautiful.
And so and it's amazing, guys come in and some of the, again, the guys that have the idea of the, UFC fighter kind of thing, and that's what they're after, the mixed martial arts.
For sure.
We've had 1 or 2 of those guys come in and I'm like, here, touch hands with her. And she's relaxed, and Kung Fu. So anyways, I don't know. I'm kind of ranting and going off into different tangents there.
Okay.
But the martial arts has it's been I ask what does it mean if I train to be a Kung Fu Sifu? 10 years, Grandmaster Muay Tung is who I'm training underneath his lineage now, and my Sifu's Owen Matson, and he opened up the Detroit Kung Fu Academy in Eastern Market. And it grew up in, this is before the Eastern Market is what it is today.
Sure. If
you remember how it was back in 2019, late 90s. Well, Sifu Owen Matson, he opened that school in Eastern Market out of his loft, and he lived there. And guys needed the martial arts there for, to defend themselves. There were, there's it was a very diverse population of students. There was a significant number of LGBTQ plus.
Sure.
There was, the whole realm of folks that were training in the Eastern Market, and there were quite a few occurrences where folks would get jumped, and they defended themselves. A couple of guys got one of the students I know, he got jumped by a couple of guys with baseball bats, and he defended himself and was able to. He survived and did really well. So, the idea when you think in terms of, hey, I said, the idea of what we do is we're going to train this martial art, and my Sifu had said, consider yourself a gourmet chef, and you're preparing the best and finest meal that you're ever going to have. It's going to be the pièce de résistance for your,
love it,
right?
Yes.
And you're never going to get the taste of it, right? And that's what we do as martial artists. Like, I'm trying to create this perfect,
yes,
this perfect structure, this perfect form, this perfect,
yes,
this perfect answer,
yes,
that's adaptable to any situation.
And that's what you got to look at. And I don't know if you can see behind you, we have a shirt that's been here for years.
Yeah.
It says Delphi G. Ford Memorial, and that was probably one of the last tournaments Grandmaster Delphi Ford gave. And we've had that shirt, wow, I don't know, it's been so long. And I said I would leave it there. And even when the shirt begins to shred, the idea is to put it in some glass and hang it, because that was important to me. And I remember, and he's been very inspirational to so many people, man. And if you look, I always say Michigan martial arts, there was only so many schools you could have went to. And we're going to be wrapping it up in a second. And if you didn't go to Yellow Tigers, if you didn't train with Umfundishi Cofield, if you didn't train with Walter King, if you didn't train with, people like Curtis Butler and Richard Plowden, and there was some other, Tamari martial arts that when Grandmaster, when Moses came in, if you didn't go to that workshop and all of those things, you didn't train with anybody. There were many schools, but there were only a few schools that had the recognition that you were getting real good self-defense martial arts. Outside of now, we're flipping over to a more sports karate, which is good, but the lineage goes back to self-defense, and it will always be self-defense, right? Because you and I always say that martial arts is a way of life. Our children, the way we do stuff, the way we talk to our wives, the way you eat, sleep, the way you vote, the way you drive, everything is martial arts. The way we can calm ourselves down in any situation. You can yell at me all you want. That martial arts kicks in. That self-defense kicks in mentally and spiritually, so that I know that I don't want to hurt myself, and I don't want you to hurt me either. You get it? I didn't say I don't want to hurt you. I said I don't want you to hurt me. I don't want to hurt myself, and I don't want you to hurt me, because we know what we can do as martial artists. From a self-defense mental first, and then if we have to go physical, we leave that as the last resort, because there's no other way out. And then we don't try to kill a person. We try to maim them, get them off of us so they can have a good rest of the day. So talk about real quick before we leave, one, how we can reach you. Are there classes available in Detroit, and where, and what day, so people can know and understand that we still have a Detroit connection that does the Kung Fu, because Kung Fu is hot. Out here, I don't think there's a school that does it out here, by the way.
There's not.
Yeah.
And a lot of why I went to the Detroit Kung Fu Academy is that they were linked to a lineage back to Hong Kong, back to Yip Man. We have a very live, we can link ourselves to Infadishi and El Kibudo, and you can see the train there. Okay. If somebody came in to me, and this is, you mentioned a lot of great, iconic martial artists, and I stand in their shadow. Sure. I am never going to say that, please don't put me in the same, those guys are like up here, and even with the Kung Fu, I train underneath some guys, but with guys, but you just feel a difference, and when you're touching the hands of a true master. Yes, I strive to that. I'm a lifetime student. Yes, sir. And I'm going to continue doing that. But as far as self-defense, I train strictly self-defense. Okay. In the form of Wing Chun Kung Fu. It's a couple 100-year combat system. It's proven. It's used by elite special forces and elite law enforcement around the globe. It's practical. It's simple to learn. but it's very hard to master. It takes a lifetime. But the thing is, you don't have to master it to be able to use it, right? So what we're not doing is we're not training, jocks to beat people up in a ring. What I'm trying to do is train, I've got a couple of students, and not just for self-defense. It's like, we're going to teach you to maintain your mobility, right? I've got a couple of students in their 80s. And the one gentleman was a football coach in Flint, and his wife is a school principal in Detroit. And I believe he had a stroke. And one day he had fallen down, and she couldn't get him up. And fortunately, one of my Kung Fu brothers was there and was able to get him up. So we started using the Kung Fu as a method of try to, not as treatment, but, to help him to gain some autonomy and mobility with himself, because we could do it sitting in a chair, right?
Yeah.
But so he can defend himself, but he can also defend himself sitting in a chair,
yes.
right? And that training wasn't very long-lived, but they got enough from the forms that we do. So we're the school, we're on Michigan Avenue, 3364 Michigan Avenue, just outside of Corktown. We're in Core City neighborhood of Detroit. That's our headquarters location. My Sifu and his oldest student, they run the program out of there along with a handful of other Sifus. I teach classes there in the mornings, a couple days a week. And then I've got a studio in Downriver. It's Downriver Kung Fu. It's operating out of the Taylor Recreation Center, and I teach classes there 3 nights a week. And we have a location up in Oakland County as well, in Berkeley. And Sifu Lawrence Farr he runs the Berkeley location along with Sifu David, and there's a couple other Sifus. Again, all these guys are from Detroit and out of the Eastern Market School. And then out of that school, I think in terms of Eastern Market, I just went to Vienna, Austria with my wife, and we went and visited her family in Germany. But we went over, the impetus for that was to go visit Brandon. So you got this young brother from the east side of Detroit. He's got a Kung Fu studio in Austria.
Wow.
Right? Used the martial arts to move himself. And he came up in the, he'll tell you, he came up in the culture, on the streets. He's seen an awful lot of stuff, but he used the martial arts, to develop some sense about personal discipline, self-discipline, right? Gauging himself what he wanted for his life and not letting other people dictate who he is going to become. And again, back to what we get from the martial arts, I think is the ability to do that. So that's who we are. That's what we do. I don't know. I always feel like, I shouldn't be, I look back now and sometimes it's like, it's not a false humility. It's just like I always feel like I'm always focused on what I don't know or what I can't do, right? That's the stuff that I look at.
Yes, sir.
But then I look at the body of work that I have with my experiences. My wife says it's pretty impressive.
Your wife's right.
And if your wife can say that about something you've done, I don't know if she says that just because I'm her older Kung Fu brother. So
Okay.
Wrap it up with this. And you talk about, to me, it's more, we're a family, right? And one of the things that they do, they don't bow, but we say we're all one family under the 4 oceans, or however that is,
Yes,
right,
sir.
around the 4 oceans. And the martial arts should be something that brings people together.
Yes, sir.
And it's not something to drive us apart. I think it's a place we can find common ground. I always loved, Master Moody would tell me, just pummel me with his sticks. But he told me the story about the way that they use the martial arts in Africa, and I was just always enamored with that. It was like, it was a way to, extol your skills as a man.
Yes, sir.
And you could get you a mate from another tribe.
Yes, sir.
But you couldn't leave somebody harmed there because you'd be creating a deficit, and people would have to carry that. So I always remember that in terms of what we train is, what we want to do is be able to demonstrate that we have the skills and the experience that, we can hold up and be a positive attribute in our community, but we're not going to hurt you in the process of doing that.
And that's it.
Right? We're not going to try to create a deficit that somebody else has to carry around. So I appreciate you having me, Mku Olu.
Yes, sir.
Again, I don't even feel like I belong in the circle of folks that when you talk about these guys, they're iconic. You think about what Master Plowden's done. And I remember one time I said Master Plowden, and he said, I still cringe when somebody says that. I get it. If somebody says Sensei or Sifu,
Right.
because I've got an idea what that is.
Yes, sir.
And it's never been the one it's always my eyes looking at it. It's never been me looking at myself as such. But I do try to hold up the standards that have been presented.
Yeah, and that's all we can do is just do our best. So we're going to wrap this segment up, and there's going to be more stories. We'll be coming back live doing some stuff with you, Brother Hargraves, because we could talk about this all day, and we have to, because we don't want to leave nothing left on the table. As my parents would say, I'm part of the clean plate family. You eat it all, and then you get some more later. So, and so this segment is Just Kicking It. Again, my name is Olu Jabari, your host at Jabari's Martial Arts Academy. Our producer is Brother DWalls. He'll be getting his information up to you. You can reach us at 313-629-8524 or send us an email, justkickdem@gmail.com, and or reach us on Facebook. So again, we appreciate you, brother. We're glad you came on. We want to have you come back when we do the large roundtable discussion. And you don't have to bring any weapons, just bring yourself.
All right. And big thank you to Infodici Cofield.
Yes, sir.
We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. And he's been doing something Detroit special for over 40 years. I'm very, very proud to be a part of that. Humbled to be in that circle of folks. And of course, Grandmaster Anopa and Grandmaster Fort, I owe them, my life.
We both do. So Grandmaster Caulfield is my instructor, and he always will be. So appreciate everyone for listening in. This is Olu Jabari with the Mr. One and Only Mr. Hargraves. Thank you. Have a good day.
Where you at?